heart that hurts. I want to spend my life mending broken people. I want to spend my life mending broken people. Hello and welcome to 3ABN Today. Thank you for joining us as you do each and every day. And as always, thank you for your love and your prayers and financial support of 3ABN. I'm co-hosted today with dear sweet Yvonne. And this is a wonderful woman who loves Jesus.
Oh,
and
praise
always
the Lord.
has something to say when it comes time to testify.
Well, praise
and I love
the Lord.
that about you.
Praise the Lord. Thank you.
You give God honor and glory and praise.
Well, He's worthy to be praised.
He's done great things in your life.
He
hasn't
has. He has. For everyone.
Yeah.
He's such a great God. He does great things for everyone.
Well, our guest today, and I hesitate to use the word guest because we've been friends and co-workers for 20 some odd years.
Wow.
But usually folks don't see him because he's behind the camera, but we have convinced, no, the Holy Spirit's convinced him to come in front of the camera because I couldn't do it all these years. So I know it's the Lord. And so I'd like to introduce, for those who may not know, many of you will, Bobby Davis. Bobby, it's good to have you here today.
Thank you, Danny.
And cowboy hat and all, I really like that. That's kind of a new thing that he's been doing. I think I'm partially responsible for that, and he's got boots. They may get a pretty soon they may, okay, there you go, got some cowboy boots up there too.
All right.
And so, you know, coming from the East Coast and to Southern Illinois, we're kind of a little bit of cowboy country here. And we have horses, so I think he looks good in it, don't you? I like it. And you feel comfortable, right?
Thank you, I do.
Good,
actually.
good.
It took a little getting used to in the beginning, but I love it now.
Well, Bobby, we tell the folk at home that the blessing of God is on the go.
Amen.
And I found out a long time ago, and I feel blessed for this, that my goal was to say I want to be a blessing, Yvonne, to those I come in contact with. So when I get a chance, I want to give my testimony of what God has done for me. And maybe in my childlike faith and growing up, I somehow thought that my testimony would help be the salvation of someone else. Well, in a sense it is, but I really found out that we can't do anything.
Right.
It's the Holy Spirit that really does it. But the reason, so then I say, well, why does God tell us to go ye into all the world? Well, that's for my own salvation and your salvation, because if we're only thinking about me, myself, and I, then how are we going to love people around us? So Jesus knows when he says, go share your testimony, that you get to know people. And when you get to know people, you begin to love people like Jesus did, then you become a conduit where the Lord actually can work through us to be a blessing to someone else. So indeed, we can help, but it's the Holy Spirit that really does the work of salvation. You agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, today we have Bobby Davis. And Bobby, you grew up, you're born in the States, but your folks were missionaries where?
In Brazil.
For how many years?
The northeastern part of Brazil. We were there for about 15 and a half years.
Okay, 15 and a half years. Then you came back to the States.
We did. My dad studied briefly at Andrews University, getting his doctorate in theology, and then moved out to Massachusetts. And a few years later, I followed and lived there, finished up college there, and started working there for quite a few years.
I'm sorry.
We're going to have a song in just a minute.
Sure.
But go ahead with your thought.
Okay, I was just going to ask, as the son of a missionary or missionaries, what was your relationship with Jesus like?
Well, in the beginning, it was very good. I was baptized when I believe I was 9.5. And unfortunately, along the way, I started getting headstrong and wanting to do my own thing. And during my teenage years and later in my 20s, you know, I definitely rebelled, left the church, left the Lord. And yet, you know, I asked my father many years later when I was rebaptized, I said, Dad, why did you baptize me when I was 9.5? Was I too young? And he said, no, son. He says, I knew you loved the Lord and you loved Jesus, and I wanted to honor that request to be baptized to follow Jesus.
Okay.
So my story is kind of the story of the prodigal son.
Okay.
And yet, you know, it's a story of redemption.
Amen.
And I'm so grateful not only for the Lord being patient with me, but the Holy Spirit that never gave up.
Okay.
And still pursues me to this day.
It's a great story, and maybe if there were words that could explain it, might be in a song called The Love of God.
Amen.
Touches me here. The Brady's, you'll love this song.
Oh,
The Love of God.
yes.
The love of God is greater far than tongue or pen could ever tell. It goes beyond the highest star and reaches to the lowest hell. The guilty pair bow down with care. God gave His Son to win His erring child. He reconciled and pardoned from his sin. Could we with ink the ocean fill, and were the skies of parchment made, and every stalk on earth a quill, and every man a scribe by trade, to write the love of God above would drain the ocean dry, nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. Oh, love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and strong, it shall forevermore endure. The saints and angels' song, it shall forevermore endure. The saints and angels' song. How wonderful, how marvelous this precious love of God. The precious love of God.
Glory.
Woo.
Glory.
It makes me want to shout. I'm trying to contain myself right now.
Well, isn't that something?
Oh, it's so
What a
beautiful.
great job by the Brady's, too. And, absolutely beautiful song. Larry Goss arrangement.
Our
of
precious
course, but
Larry.
that's the story of all of us. We have to know that we serve a God of love that's an endless love, that He's going to love us regardless. Bobby, you told a little bit of your story, that when you were raised as missionaries in the missionary field, but you came back to the States, ended up on the East Coast, but as you got in your late teens and your 20s, you began to rebel.
That's right.
And so God still loved you through all your rebellion, didn't He?
Amen.
But you say that you really I don't know if you quit loving God, or you just chose not loved yourself more, or you just loved the world more, or if you just took a break. I don't know how to explain that. You know, in your own in your own mind, in your own life. But what caused that? You're raised and you're baptized at a young age, and you have wonderful parents, and you just want to go out. So you didn't just like say, I think I won't go to church today. You started doing substance abuse.
That's right.
Right? Tell us about it.
Actually, I didn't until I was 18. One of the things I can tell you about myself and later on in life through my teen years is I always felt like I didn't quite fit in. I felt like I was on the outside looking in most of the time. I had lots of friends, but I could be in a room full of my friends and feel completely alone.
Really?
Like I didn't really fit in. And of course, being raised in the mission field, that was easy to not fit in because I didn't.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't look like the Brazilians. I wasn't Brazilian. But it wasn't so bad in the mission field. But when I came back, I was almost 16. I didn't know a single sport that Americans play. I didn't know a Chevy from a Ford back in the day when you could tell the difference.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody on TV, nobody on the radio. I didn't know any of the popular culture. And I felt completely out of place.
Okay.
And that just fed all of this. And by then, I had started drifting away from the Lord. And what happened was I went into the dorms, and I was in a Christian university, you know, in the dorms. And, you know, wherever you go, you will find people that want to do the same things you do. And the people that seem to be having fun, the people that seemed to have it all were the people that were partying. And unfortunately, that was the crowd that I fell in with. Later on, I did go to a public university, actually a college in Massachusetts. I moved back to my parents' house and finished up a degree in television production there.
Okay.
But along the way, again, I found the friends I was looking for. They were easy to find. And the devil makes it attractive and easy. You know, I was having fun. I felt like I fit in. In my particular case, I basically got into drinking so much that I became alcoholic. And for me, alcohol doesn't make me feel better than everybody else. It just makes me feel equal to everybody else.
I see.
So that was all I was trying to do, was fit in and be part of what was going on. And unfortunately, there go my morals, there goes my relationship with God. It caused problems in my own family and just made me miserable. And the only answer I seemed to have that would make me feel better temporarily was to continue to drink. And although there was some drug usage in my story, that wasn't the major part of it. And I thank God for that, because there are some wicked drugs out there that are so much harder to get off of. And my heart still goes out to people, especially in today's day and age when so much in the world is so messed up. People look for answers in, you know, in drugs and alcohol and other things that supposedly will calm them down, keep them just stable, when they don't realize that it's a trap, that it just draws a person in more and more and more. And that was my case. Let's see, it took me a while to get through college, unfortunately. Most of it was not because I transferred from one university to the other. Most of it was because I was too busy having fun, so to speak, and my grades weren't that good, and it took me 5.5 years to get a 4-year degree, so that should tell you something.
Partying was getting in the way of your education.
And I'm not quite sure how I graduated, but I did. And I couldn't find a job in television for a while, for a couple of years.
So while you were doing all this partying, that's when the alcoholism was kind of taking root?
Yes.
But you were still functioning? You were going to classes and,
Yes.
and doing your work?
Yes. I was working in the restaurant business at the time, closing down restaurants, and anybody who's ever done that knows that most of the crew likes to go drink after hours, you know, and that's basically what I was doing. Going home, trying to sleep real fast and wake up smart, and of course try to go to school, and by the middle of the afternoon I was done with that and I was on to other things. So sadly, I'm sure I was a disappointment to my parents, and they knew, I'm sure, what was going on in my life.
Did they
And
talk
yet-
to you about it?
No, I'm not quite sure why, but probably because they sensed that they were powerless to do anything about it. You know, what happens with alcoholism, what I've understood of alcoholism is that trying to reason with an alcoholic is very difficult and really doesn't work because it's not a logical thing. For me, it was a solution to all my problems. And if it was the answer to my problems and you're going to take the answer to my problems away, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to consider it. And what I've understood of alcoholism is that once I become alcoholic or cross that line, because some people seem to be able to drink for a while and don't have a problem. Well, for me, it was an instant relief from everything, from the fears, from the frustration, from the disillusionment with life that I felt. When I took alcohol the very first time, it was magic. It was magic. And that's the danger of taking that first drink. If you've never had a drink, I beg you not to start, because there's no guarantee that that one drink is going to ruin your life.
Well, and isn't it the same with drugs? I've heard the same thing with people who use drugs. That first hit, that first time, it's like it seems to be magical, but that's just the delusion,
That's what
the
it really
illusion
is.
of Satan.
It really is magical. It's nothing physical, spiritual. It's demonic.
It's
so
demonic.
Magic is
Right,
more
a
considered
supernatural
with the
thing.
supernatural thing. Now, did you start smoking too? Like
Yes, I
cigarettes?
did.
Was that one of the first
Yes, I
things you did?
Well, I had my first cigarette and my first drink all in the same night. So,
Okay. Same
and I
night.
did all
So-
of that for quite a while.
So you went through this. You graduated. You were in trouble spiritually.
Yes.
But you chose this was what you wanted.
That's right.
But you did get a job in television.
I did eventually. First, I moved out because I was causing so much chaos at home, and that's probably one of the biggest regrets that I have in my life, is how badly I treated the people that loved me the most. And finally, when I did move out, I just moved into the party scene, and that was that. Eventually, I did get a job in television. In fact, Moses Primo, who's
Yes.
the chief engineer here, got me my first job in TV.
Really?
Oh.
He was working at a small television station in the Boston market, and he called me one day and said, you know, there's an opening here.
How did he know you? Because your parents were, Moses is from Brazil.
From Brazil. He had come to the States to study English, and he happened to come to the college where they were teaching.
Wow.
And so, of course, Brazilians and missionaries from Brazil,
Sure.
instant friends.
Hook up.
And Moses is really family to us.
Yes.
So he did invite me to apply, and I did. And what happened was I got into the field that I loved the most, you know. I had a career counselor in college that said, do what your heart wants to do. Because if you do something else, some other career, and you really want to do this over here, you might be 40, 50 years old and trying to switch careers. It's not going to work. Do it now, pay your dues, you know, just hang around, whatever you can do to get your foot in the door. And that's what happened. I became a video editor and eventually a program director for that station. But they had budget cuts back in the 1991, I guess it was. And for a whole 13 months, I was unemployed. And that was a difficult thing. Now, before that, I have to back up a little bit. Before that, I did get sober. And part of that was connecting to God. In fact, the biggest part of that, the only part that matters, was I had to have a connection with God.
What
Because-
led you to get sober?
Well, despair. Absolute despair. I just couldn't live one more day that way. And I cried out to God for help. I said, God, help me. Don't let me die like this. And when I did, you know, the answer was there. And I found that by connecting in a very simple way to God and learning to trust Him, and that 13-month period of no job really led me to trust Him in ways that I had never trusted before. I was about 2 years sober when I lost my job. And for that whole 13 months before I came here, it was a struggle. It was a struggle. Financially, I couldn't figure out how in the world am I making it? How can I even pay my rent? And yet, the Lord kept supplying. And I had good friends and mentors that would say things like, well, is that odd or is that God? You know?
God or is it God? I like it.
And I had to admit that was what it was. Now, see, I had the perfect parents to show me the love of God and to show me what it's all about the altruism, the service to others, the love of others. But I couldn't seem to connect through their faith. I had wonderful friends along the way, Christian friends, but they couldn't make that connection for me. I had to hit bottom, literally. I had to say, I can't figure this out. I can't figure life out. I can't figure my way out of this drinking problem. I've got to ask somebody for help. And out of desperation, which I think is what all of us end up having to do in one way or another, is to cry out to God for help.
Right.
And I said, God, help me. And he did.
How long had you lived like that, like away from God?
Well, away from God, I'm not sure, but I had been drinking for 11 years.
Wow.
And that's not a long time for alcoholics, but believe me,
That's a long time.
it was long enough for me. I just couldn't take any more from it. And so, anyway, as I'd gotten sober and I had this baby relationship with God, and for 13 months, that sustained me enough to keep me going through that unemployment period. And believe me, I looked for a job everywhere. And then Moses shows up again in the scene, and apparently he had a conversation with you one day, and you said, we need some more people here. 3ABN was growing, and it was 1992, I believe. And he called me up and asked me to send a resume, and then he called me and said, don't bother. He says, I need you out here for an interview. Danny says, I don't need to see his resume. If he's any good, get him out here for an interview. So I flew out here for an interview, and honestly, I didn't want to come. The Christian television, I had a bad taste in my mouth. I'd worked in commercial television for 10 years or so, and I had seen what Christian television was all about, what I thought Christian television was all about. And without naming names, there had been a lot of people who had fallen from grace in a very public way in Christian television, and I just had no use for that. And in fact, I asked Moses, I said, Moses, please tell me that this is different from all these other ministries. And he says, oh yes, it's different. And he went on to say, you know, we've never done a telethon. We've never begged for money. The Lord has always supplied our needs here at 3ABN. And I remember raising an eyebrow saying, yeah, well, I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
But I came out here, and the very first day when I toured the campus and all of that, I couldn't believe that you actually had a television station out here. In fact, you guys had better equipment than I was used to back in a commercial station. And I saw God's blessing, and I saw the passion and the excitement that the entire team had. You know, the fact that they, wow, there were teenagers here directing programs, and I'm like, how did they learn how to do that? You know, I went to school, and I'm not even a good director, but these guys were awesome. And you had a real studio and a real transmission set up for a satellite, and it just amazed me. And I don't know, I prayed, and I said, God, if this is where you want me to be, then you've got to let me know in a big way. And he did. Actually, before I ever got a tour, I came here on a Friday evening, and on Sabbath morning I woke up and I sat behind Moses' house in a swing, and I looked out at everything, and I thought, this is so beautiful. And see, I'm used to talking to God. Part of my recovery is having a prayer life and meditating on God's word. And so what I said to him several times was, God, this is really beautiful out here. It's so peaceful. And suddenly I had my sign. And I remember crying that morning and just shaking my head. And I thought, God, you're so funny. I can't believe you do this. You know, I got a dose of serenity, what we call serenity. That peace with God and peace with everyone around me. It was so strong that morning. I'm sure that that was the strongest feeling of serenity I've ever felt in my life. And that was my unmistakable sign. I had to quit all the other things. You know, I'd gotten sober from alcohol, but I still smoked. There were a lot of other things wrong in my life. And that day, everything changed because I knew I was supposed to be here. And it was a struggle for me. At first, I was editing, as you remember, at night. We had another editor in the daytime, so I got the night shift. And it was my job to listen to sermons and cut them down. I remember there was one, it was on the nature of Christ and how he was tempted in every way and how he had suffered all the same temptations that we have. And it was a good sermon, but it was 90 minutes long, and it had to be cut down to less than an hour. And I thought, how do you do that? How do you cut that much out of a sermon and make sense?
Yeah.
So I remember editing all of that and then covering each one of those edits, you know, where the cuts were, with an audience shot. And then I thought, this thing is not going to hold together. So at the end of the night, I rewound that tape. And I started playing it, watching for those edits, making sure they were all right, and listening for continuity. And that's what changed my life again, because the Lord spoke to my heart. And I ended the thing, I realized at the end, I hadn't even paid attention to edits anymore. I was listening to the message.
Wow.
And I said, God, I can't believe you'd bring me all the way out here to make it my job and back me into a corner like this, just to reach my heart. And I said out loud, I said, if you want me that bad, you can have me. You know?
Wonderful.
And I was rebaptized. And over the years, my relationship with God has grown. It's been a struggle sometimes, and other times not at all.
We've seen it. We've seen it. Especially as far as you've been willing to talk about it.
Sure.
You know, on a more private, even private. You're kind of a private, I look at him as more of a private person until the right situation. Bobby is not one to just insert himself in a conversation if you're with a bunch of people. If you ask him something, he'll say, but a lot of times he sits and listens. But I've noticed in the last few years a change in you. Sure. And you found out something very important. I want to get into it a little bit.
Sure.
That help for you was helping others.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit. First of all, you found out you needed to surround yourself around people who had, you know, gained victory over some of the things, alcohol.
Absolutely.
So you found groups of people to help you, and then you, in turn, began to minister, disciple others. Tell
Absolutely.
us how that works.
Well, it's an interesting thing that others have observed and put into words. I'm not original about this, but I believe that our past, especially the things we struggle with, in fact, I'll just say our dark past, the darkest moments of our past, turn out to be, in God's hands, they turn out to be the most precious things we have. The experiences, the struggles, and the trials, and the heartache that we have in life, if we allow God to change all of that, He will change it and make it into the biggest asset we have. And I say that because for me, the worst thing I thought I could ever have is to have alcoholism. And the truth is, it turns out to be the best thing. The people I always struggled to fit in with and become friends with now are the people that I minister to.
Okay.
And I can gain their trust very quickly, where most people cannot. Normal people, so-called normal people, I mean, we're all normal, but people that don't have a drinking problem cannot even begin to help somebody who has a drinking problem.
Yeah.
And it's the strangest thing, you know. If I had a brain tumor, I wouldn't go to a brain surgeon that had a brain tumor. I would go to one who doesn't have one, right? I want one with all his brains to operate on my brain. But the sad part is that with alcoholism and with other addictions, we won't listen to somebody unless we know they've been where we are.
Yeah.
And God in His mercy has given me that mission to help other alcoholics, especially other alcoholics.
That's true. Like in my case, I've never drank. I never, to this day, I've never drank a beer, never tasted alcohol. It's just one of those things I never did. But I've had a lot of things in my life that I've needed help with and had to go to others and listen to others to help me. But in 1982, when Melody's mother, Kay, was in an automobile accident and she was killed in that accident, I've been amazed over the years how many people have lost a spouse that I'm able to talk to, and they'll listen to me because they know I've been through it. I've actually had people call me and say, can you talk to me? It's been 3 months. I thought it'd get better. 6 months, it's better. I feel like it's worse. And I know what they're going through, that pain. So I've been able to help and things like that. You have been through the pain where people are today, but it took you getting other people to encourage you, to be there to support you. And there are groups, and we're not naming the groups necessarily, but there are groups, and especially we encourage people to go to those that know there's a God and say this is really your answer out. But what it did for you, tell us about the changes in your own life when mission really wasn't for your own life, but it was to help others.
Well, I can give you a good example, a recent example, and that's part of the reason I guess I agreed to do this program. Recently, I found out, actually a few months ago, I found out that I had skin cancer. I had melanoma, It was a spot on my back that had been growing there for quite a few years. And I had been concerned about it. I'd mentioned it to my doctor. He had removed a small mole there before, and the scar tissue actually is what began to change and become bigger. And he kept checking it and didn't think it was a big deal. Well, the day finally came when I said, I'm worried about this. I need you to either biopsy this or send me off to a dermatologist or somebody. And so they did. And it took, better part of a month to even get the results back. In fact, sadly, the pathologist couldn't figure it out and sent it off, quote unquote, to Boston somewhere, and had another second opinion, and sure enough, it was melanoma. Now, at first they thought it was in early stages, but there had been another spot that had developed close to that spot, and everybody was concerned that it was already metastasizing or spreading from one spot to the other on my skin, and that usually indicates that it could be system-wide. So I could have been anywhere all the way up through stage 4 cancer, and that concerned me a lot.
Oh, yeah.
For years, part of what I do for my recovery is to take an inventory of myself from time to time to see where I am. And one of the lists of things that I do is inventory my fears, because I know that if I'm afraid, then my go-to answer is to drink. So I keep track of my fears. I keep track of my resentments. I keep track of anything that I feel guilty or ashamed about. And I look at those things as part of a routine part of my life, so that I don't let those things creep up and build up inside of me, because I know those will lead me back to a drink. So on my fear list, many, many times I have had to list the fear of dying and the fear of cancer. And now I had both. I was facing at least cancer and maybe dying. And I'll tell you, that really threw me for a loop. It tested my faith. And sadly, I don't know how well I stood up to it, because I remember finding out on a Friday. On Sabbath, I went to church, and by Sabbath afternoon, I was laying in bed with the covers over my head, trying to sleep, trying to forget. And I couldn't, and I tossed and turned, and finally, the despair just built up in me, and once again I said those 3 words that changed my life when it came to drinking, and now I said it again. I said, God help me. God help me. And I'll tell you, God knows me by name. He knows all of us by name.
Amen.
And I heard his voice. It was undeniable and so distinct, I know I would recognize it anywhere. I think all of us, most of us, or hopefully all of us, have heard that voice, but man, it was so loud in my head. It might as well have been in that room, because he said, Bobby Davis, get up. And I just sat bolt upright in bed, and I thought, wow, what was that? And the next words were, it's time to stop dying and time to start living.
Okay.
And I was like,
All right.
okay, Lord. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed and thinking, what do I do? What do I do? And some words came to me of a man that wrote about his experience, and he said that in the beginning of his sobriety, he felt like depression and fear and self-pity were just getting the best of him, and he felt like he was going to drink. And every time he felt that way, he would get up and go to a hospital and find somebody in the alcoholic ward and try to help that person. And when he did, he says, I was amazingly lifted up and placed back on my feet. He says, it's a design for living that really works.
Okay.
And as soon as that thought went through my mind, I thought, I need to find somebody to help. There are 2 treatment centers here in Illinois, close by. Neither one of them will allow somebody to just walk in off the street to talk to their patients. But I knew there was a place down in Paducah, Kentucky, about an hour away. And they had meetings there, and they allowed visitors to come in. And so I thought, I'll go down there and see if I can find somebody to visit with. Now, I don't know anybody in that place, but I just walked in, and afterwards I'm looking around to see if I can find somebody after their meeting ended, and they all ran for the door, and I thought, I forgot, they all want to go out and smoke. So I don't smoke, and I'm sitting inside going, well, I wonder how I can find somebody in here. And they had a drinking fountain there, and I got a drink of water, and all of a sudden this young man comes back through the door and walks right over to me, introduces himself to me, and asked me if this was my first time there. And I said no, meaning I had visited there before. And he says, I said, this is actually my second time. He goes, oh yeah, me too. I really messed up the first time. And I realized he thinks I'm a patient, but that's okay. I didn't correct him, I just let him talk. And suddenly he's pouring his heart out to me about everything that went wrong so quickly in his life once he had gotten a period of sobriety but gone back to drinking. And I asked him a few questions, you know, and I let him know that I understood. And finally he realized, oh, you're not a patient. I said, no. And that man asked me for help. Not that first night, but the next week, you know, I have to say, you know, after I talked to him for about an hour, I was driving home, and about halfway home, I realized, you know, I hadn't thought about cancer one single time, the whole time I was there. And helping him, or trying to help him, I really was helping myself.
Okay.
And I remembered that. The whole next week went by. Next Sabbath, guess what? I was in bed again, struggling to get past the depression and the fear. And suddenly it was time to go back to the treatment center, and I did. And sure enough, he was there, and he was so happy to see me. And that night, he asked me to be his mentor.
Okay.
Now, he lives an hour away, and normally I don't travel an hour every direction. He was then there, so it's not like he could come up to see me.
Sure.
And I started talking to him, and I said, well, you know, you're kind of a long ways away, and this, that, and the other. And I saw his face fall, and all of a sudden I hear that voice, the voice of God. Bobby Davis, really? You asked me for help, and I sent you this young man, and now you're going to tell him no? And I went, you know what? I'll be happy to help you. And we started meeting on Saturday evenings, and a little bit later I decided to fly out to Massachusetts for a second opinion on this cancer. The doctors here wanted to do surgery in this, and yet they weren't sure of how they wanted to proceed. And I ended up at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is one of the premier cancer institutes in the country. And at first their diagnosis was the same. We're afraid this is stage 4. And they ordered PET scans and MRIs and all kinds of things, scheduled surgery. But here's where I saw God leading me in that direction. My parents lived there, so I could stay with them for any kind of treatment, but I really didn't know if I had stage 4, if I was going to be really going through chemo or all those kinds of things. So the next day I had an appointment with a dermatologist there. As I'm sitting with this dermatologist, he's asking questions, and I realize he knows a lot about my case. And since I hadn't seen a dermatologist anywhere else, I said, how do you know so much about my case? And he says, well, I'm the one they sent the biopsies to find out when they couldn't figure out what it was in Southern Illinois. They sent them to me. And I thought, what are the odds that I would have him as my dermatologist? He's also a pathologist. And he was unbelievable. He gave me his personal cell phone number and begged me to put him on my team so that he could follow through with this whole process. I did see a surgeon. The PET scan came back with no cancer anywhere else in my body.
Praise the Lord.
But that fear did not go away for those 8 days that I had to wait for that PET scan, until finally somebody sent me a little meditation by text, and it said basically, our life is like a ladder that stretches from this world into eternity. And all we're supposed to do is keep climbing that ladder. But sometimes we get afraid because we don't see where that ladder is placed. And then the question to me to meditate on was, would God put you on a ladder that was not secure?
Okay.
And if he puts you on that, you can climb each step with confidence.
Okay.
And know that he will
Good.
take care of you. And at that point, I broke through that fear. And I was so amazed. You know, the treatment went well. I had a surgery. They checked my lymph nodes. It was not spread. It's considered stage 2 because it had already started to go deeper into my skin, but it had not gone through my body. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am for the team that worked with me there, for the experience that at first seemed so disruptive and threatened to end my life. Turns out now to be one of the biggest blessings, because what I got out of that experience were so many things. First of all, my father was diagnosed at the same time when I was there. And I was able to be there for my mother when she found out, and to be there with her and my dad when she told him what was going on. Praise God, halfway in through his chemotherapy, he's doing well. In fact, I believe God's hand is over him, because he has yet to feel one single effect from all that chemotherapy. He's never been nauseous, never lost his energy. He's a professor. He still teaches. He's 83 and a half years old. He's still teaching theology to his theology students. And that's his passion in life, is to tell and teach other people about the Lord. And so I was there when that happened. You know, what kind of timing is that? God's perfect timing. And honestly, Danny, the biggest thing that I've gotten from this is an amazing a renewal of my faith, but even more than that, the Lord has just lit a fire inside of me.
All right.
And I realized, you know, if before I found out that there was no other cancer in my body, I finally broke through that fear, and I realized, you know what? I need to get about my Father's business. I need to do more for the Lord. I need to do more for the people that suffer with alcoholism. I need to do more at work. I need to do more at church. I need to do more everywhere in my life. And I can't say that I'm too busy. You know, we were talking about that earlier, about being too busy. We all have the same 168 hours a week. You know, what we spend it on and what we focus on is what it's all about. And for me, that renewal inside of me has just lit a fire inside of me. And the only reason I'm sitting here in this chair is because I can't keep quiet about it. You know, the Lord has given me a mission, you know, and now the mission is even widened into other people who are dealing with cancer. Never in my life did I think I would be able to minister and to help them through that. But I know because of this hard experience on the other side of it, and it really didn't matter to me. I don't care if I have 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years to live. You know, I want to do all I can. I want to pack as much as I can into that. I want to do everything I can. You know, whatever talent we have. I think of Irma Bombeck's famous quote, you know, the comedian from years ago. She said, "When I stand before my Creator, I want to be able to say to him, I have used every bit of talent you gave me." You know, and it's not about me, it's about him. And so, I don't know, I came back just, I don't even know, energized, I guess is what I'm saying, and on fire.
He was in my office, and it was just, I mean, passionate. We were talking, and Bobby's a great writer. He does have lots. He doesn't only do the producing and the editing, and now his voice is on the 3ABN radio. I'm telling you, he wears as many hats as anybody in his ministry, and he's good at it. He is very good. His writing has helped me tremendously over the years. I got ideas, but I don't know how to put them on paper as well as he does. So he's helped me so many times in our newsletters and our magazines and all of that. That's Bobby really making that polished. We can do it, and she can do it too, polished, but I'm not that polished. But Bobby does that for me, but his writing is great. But we were talking about some things we were doing here, but his passion came out, and I said, Bobby, we got to get you on TV. But there was almost like an abrupt, well, wait a minute. So far, I've been willing to do all this, and I help people that's, you know, alcoholics, and now people with cancer, but I'm not, he says, I'm not a in front of the camera boss. He says, that's not me. And I said, no, that's where God, now, you know, he's opened up more doors for you. But what's a testimony without a platform?
That's right.
And what better platform in our life here than 3ABN? Because, Bobby, what you're saying today is, I can promise you from doing thousands of interviews, is reaching multitudes of people who have fears in their life. Maybe it's not just from alcohol or drugs, maybe it's not from having cancer, but other fears, because we all have these fears that come, but you're saying that God gave you peace in the midst of the storm. He didn't take you out of the storm, but he's given you peace through not a storm, but a series of storms, a number of storms. And with that assurance that you have, whatever time you have left, whether it's 1 year or 10 years or 20 before the Lord comes, you're going to pack it with all you can, as the way you say, Irma Bombeck said, and you want to use it in service for the Lord. It's a great testimony, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. You know, as I was listening, I was thinking about the plan. God always has a plan for us. And even in your being in Brazil, meeting Moses Primo, you know,
There you
after
go.
he came
Is
here.
that God or is that odd?
Exactly.
That's what it
Is it
says.
coincidence or
Yeah.
divine providence,
That's right.
as you
No doubt.
say?
That's
and
right.
and so, you know, again, God is such an awesome God because He knew that you were going to spiral downward,
Right.
but He took that situation, and when you gave your heart to Him, took that situation and made something positive come from it. You can help others now who are in dire need of that kind of mentorship. So it's just, to me, God is just awesome.
And I want to
He's
go
just an
back to
awesome God.
his parents for a moment. It might sound strange. Some of us says, you know, when you ask him the question, well, how do your parents? He said, well, they didn't really say too much about it. I think one of the things we're most guilty about when we're disappointed in our kids is our own pride. If you think about it, say your dad's a pastor, he teaches theology, and then for his son to be everything but what he's teaching and helping young people be, sometimes people is like, man, that's embarrassing, that's my son. So you come home and you're beating you over the head because look what this is doing, but your folks just loved you through it.
That's right.
And they said, you know what, we're just going to love him through it. We can't beat it out of him. We can't force him to do it. So I'm not going to every night say, Bobby, you got to stop drinking. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be that. But I will guarantee you, I almost can guarantee you, they about wore out the carpet on the
That's
floors.
what I was going to say.
My parents, they knew there was a problem. And they prayed for me every day. My father and mother are some of the most humble people I know. In fact, I can honestly tell you, I don't know anybody that's
They
more
let me
humble
stay
than
in
my
their
father.
home one time, you remember?
I
Years
don't
ago.
remember that, but
They
they are the
do.
sweetest
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And Mom and Dad got to the point where they realized I was in so deep that it would take everything that God could do for me, and they realized that they needed to pray for whatever it takes, Lord. Do whatever it takes to him, but please spare his life. And they told me that one time, and I said, when did you start praying that? And when they told me, I realized that point was where my life literally fell apart. That is one of the bravest prayers I think any parent can ever pray.
Before I knew him, actually, I was speaking out on the East Coast, and Moses Primo told me we were going there. He said, oh, I know some folk, and they were gone for the weekend, but they're going to leave the key, and you just live in their home. It's a real nice home.
Wow.
I'm like, what? And he says, oh, no, you know, I said, well, I don't feel comfortable. He said, no, trust me, these folk are wonderful people. And I actually did. I rarely would do something like that, but I thought, well, how nice of these folk, you know, to open up their
I
house
didn't
to
even
me.
hear about it.
Yeah, and they weren't there, so thank you. You know, Mom and Dad, that's wonderful.
But you know, what I believe is that God doesn't waste anything.
Right.
He won't even waste our tears, our pain, our suffering. Nothing is wasted. He has a way of turning all those things, those disappointments, those fears, the sadness, the agony that we go through in life, whether it's a heartbreak or an illness or whatever, and he will turn that around. That's who he is. And nobody else, no other God can do that. Only the God that we know and that we worship. And that gives me great hope that even in the midst of all of this, I know, and this was one more confirmation, I know that he will turn this around and make good out of it. And not only has he done that for me, he's done it for, well, anybody who will surrender their life, you know.
You know,
We all reach that point.
the next thing that I can see him doing, and he's going to reject us at first, I can see him up in the pulpit.
Oh, boy.
Going to churches, giving his testimony of
Yes.
what God has done, because I
Yes.
know that's not easy for him, or at least his comfort spot. Now, you can see he's well prepared to do it and can do it, but it's just fun watching where God's taken you in places when you always, Bobby prefers to be in the back.
Yeah,
All of a
yeah.
sudden, he's out here. But hey, God's opening up the doors, and I have a feeling now you'll be willing to do whatever God impresses you to do.
If I'm asked, I am willing, of course.
Don't you love
Because
it?
I
Yeah.
believe that, you know, if we don't, it will just shrivel up and die inside of us. It's like good news can't stay inside.
Right.
I sometimes say this, and I mean this I don't encourage anybody to play the lottery and win millions of dollars, but if you ever did, could you keep quiet about it? There's no way.
Absolutely.
This is way better news than any of that.
Yeah.
In fact, winning the lottery is bad news for most people because
Yeah.
they end up losing it all. But
Absolutely.
the truth is, when you are lit up from the inside with something to share, then there's no way to keep it inside.
Years ago, I used to ask all my guests, almost every program, Bobby, if you had 2 minutes to live, you could look into this camera and talk to a lost and dying world, what would you say?
Well, I would say don't give up. God knows where you are. He knows how you got there, and He knows how to get you back on your feet. He knows how to save us. Each and every one is. There's no sin too big. There's no past too bad. In fact, it shows His power. The fact that we're willing to allow Him to do something, the farther we have fallen, the more marvelous it is in His eyes. Now, I don't believe anybody's fallen in His eyes more than anyone else, but certainly in the world's eyes. And there are different stages of despair, but the worst stage of despair is God's greatest opportunity to show His power and His love and His way of life. And that's what I want to show to people. I want to be an example. I've made myself available to be an example to Him of His power and His love and His way of life.
So never
That's
give
my
up.
prayer. Yeah.
No matter what, Bobby's telling us, no matter where you are in your life today, never give up, because God has a plan for your life. And He says that in Jeremiah, that you prosper, that you do well, that we be in health, all of these things. Mostly the plan is that we, by putting on the armor of God, studying, praying, asking God to come in our life, that it will protect us from the devil, so that we are able, when Jesus comes back, we'll be able to look up and say, lo, this is our God. My God, He's come to save us.
That's right.
And today that's our prayer for each and every one of you. So, Yvonne, thank you for being here and
thank you
being
for
the
having
co-host
me.
with me today. And Bobby, thank you so much for your willingness to give a testimony that is helping so many people around the world. God has done great things. We're going to take a break in just a moment. We're going to take a news break, but we'll come back for a closing thought. I'm glad we saved time to come back for just a moment or two in case there's something that we forgot, something that we didn't say.
Right.
We always have another closing thought.
That's right.
But Bobby, you had said something, your prayer for the day, because when we get up in the mornings, what do? I know you love to get up at 6 o'clock and spend time with the Lord and Bible study and prayer. Everybody has their own way of greeting the Lord every morning, so we wanted to hear, how does Bobby Davis greet the Lord every morning?
Well, again, this is not an original prayer, but over the years I've heard many people talk about what they pray about first thing in the morning. And when I heard this prayer, I thought, I need this in my life. And finally, over a period of time of training myself to say this, the very first thought in my mind is, good morning, Lord. What can I do for you today? That sets the course for my entire day.
Wow.
And all day long, I beg Him to just open my eyes and look for those opportunities to help others. Sometimes it's to listen to somebody, sometimes it's to share something with them, help them in some way. But every day has purpose and meaning when I say, good morning, Lord, what can I do for you today?
I love it.
sharing that.
That's
So really
great.
what he's saying is, here I am, send me.
Right.
That's right.
So that's what we want to encourage each and every one of you, that God has something special for you in your life. Isn't it amazing, when Jesus was hanging on the cross, He could look down the stream of time and see you and me.
Yes.
To see each and every one of you, God has something special for you in your life, something that He wants you to do. Every day we should say, Lord, good morning, Lord.
What can I do?
What can I do for you today? Lord, send me. Our time is all gone for today. So until we see you next time, may the Lord richly bless you, abundantly more than you could ever ask or think.